Hi, folks. You're at Taskless today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio no pictures live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast, as you're driving along in your car or your truck, or put in those earbuds and sit back and take it all in public transport. In this essay, I'd like to talk about a parliamentary committee, and this could be one of many, I guess, all across the Western world, because it's happening in all places where mass migration and illegal migration are taking place, but where a parliamentary committee is asking questions of the Department of Immigration, the people who are tasked with gathering statistics, monitoring, overseeing, and administering the programs of migration. So now, I guess there's a few things to consider just to set all this up. All the Western governments are in favour of and are fully supporting mass migration. No Western government is sovereign anymore. They're all controlled by the globalist cabal. So these Department of Immigration people are reporting to elected officials who are, again, controlled by the globalists and are in full support of mass migration. So those are their bosses saying. Now, on top of that, the Department of Immigration has been stacked with, this again, all across the Western world, has been stacked with radical open border activists who are fully and energetically and actively supporting the program as well. So you won't find anyone in there who's against mass migration or even prepared to question it. It's treated as an unalloyed good, and that's how it is. And anyone that doesn't like it or questions it is Hitler. And it's that sort of stuff. But the parliamentary committee would be, or is made up of members of the various smaller parties as well as the bigger parties. So there's going to be people on the committee who are going to actually ask questions, and they're going to want answers, and they'll be the sort of questions that the globalist controlled government parties won't ask. The government people may say, well, can you assure us you're being kind to black lesbians from Africa or something? Oh, we've got lots of programs for that. And then that'll be it's just a choreographed question, tap dance, they're doing the samba together and that sort of thing. So, but from the minor parties that aren't controlled by the globalists and may be actually elected by the people, then they do ask questions. So it's these people these politicians who are asking the real questions that focus on. And what's interesting is how hard and they're obviously it's under instructions to do this, how hard the bureaucrats try to twist and turn and avoid answering the questions and engage effectively in filibustering so that they exhaust the time of the questioner so that they can then get a tamer set of questions from the next person. But I just want to talk about that because the quite apart from once you get on the path of ideological fanatics, you accept that you can lower the standard of competence. So these public servants that look like they've come from central casting bureaucrat type thing, they look and sound and behave and the set of the jaw, the whole. They're definitely from central casting, this lot, and they all seem to be from the same central casting all over the world, whether they're in America or Britain or Australia or anywhere. So, and you got to wonder how these people even have jobs, let alone sitting in positions that are paying many hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in salary. You wouldn't employ them to sweep the floor, and yet here they are in the big bucks job with lots of glamorous international travel and so on. So the question, I'm going to sort of do a bit of a cross-section of questions here. Now, the simplest question can be obfuscated and waffled. So how many people, how many illegals have come in to, Australia, Britain, I'll use Britain, say Britain, have come into Britain over the last 12 months or year ending such and such, which would have been, we don't have fully up-to-date data on that reporting period, but it's being compiled currently. Now, I should add that these departmental people who are fronting the committee, they've got all the questions in advance. So when they front the committee and they don't have the answers, I would regard that should be some sort of punishment there. Hey, you've had these questions for weeks. What is this? Our resources have been stretched and we haven't been able to. bullshit. Everybody knows it. So they duck out of it that way. Then it'll come to, but we don't have the numbers compiled for that. So then the only time that they had up-to-date data for was from 18 months ago. Thus is their claim. They then say, well, things have changed very considerably since then. So we'll answer your questions as in the factual questions from 18 months ago, but really they're irrelevant because so much has changed since then. But we can't tell you what those changes are because we don't have up-to-date information. So thousands of bureaucrats are employed to create statistics and figures, yet that they can, the nearest up-to-date figures they can have are from 18 months ago. And clearly, and if that's not deliberate obfuscation, which it is, of course, but if it wasn't, you would say that was utter outrageous incompetence, and they should all be fired. Either way, it doesn't matter. They should be got rid of, and just on this basis alone. Then it comes to, well, how many people in that 18 months ago time period arrived in Britain illegally? We've got classification A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, P, Q. Which one are you referring to? So straight away that's they've come out. We've got all these different classifications. All of those classifications combined. You know, if you have all these classifications, why weren't we advised in advance what these classifications are and how they're defined? And thus, how many people are, oh, we haven't had time to compile those. Well, if you have those classifications, you must know, and you therefore did have time. Well, our resources, so all of them. Well, we don't actually have aggregated figures for that, but I can give you classification, X. Okay, well, how many, and what does classification? Well, classification X actually has been ended a month ago. So I can give you the figures, but they don't apply any longer, and so on. They duck and they bob and they weave. And now a very determined questioner will just keep on going, and you can tell these people don't like that. They think a couple of fob-offs is enough, and then the question will move on to something else, or a different question will then come in. But if you get a particularly determined question that makes a chase on something, so somebody wants to know how many asylum, for example, how many asylum claims were processed during period X, 12 months or whatever it was. Well, that would depend on the classification, ABC, blah, 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 and then another word salad comes out, and then that would depend on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And they love doing this, and they delight in it. You can tell, but the questioner keeps on at it. So eventually, after fuck knows how many questions and very considerable determination, they'll then say, well, the number is actually 3%. 3% of what? Well, we don't have those numbers because we. Then how can you tell it's 3%? Well, that was the numbers of the previous way of measuring it, but we've changed the measuring, and therefore we can't. And on it went. And so anyway, the question again, a determined kept on and on going, and finally got some numbers out. So it shows they actually had the numbers all along. They just didn't want to divulge it, because the more you give specifics, the more you can be tied down and held accountable and so on. And these people, if anything, are skilled, very, very skilled at avoiding accountability. And if it looks like that they're being made accountable, or they're about to be made accountable, then they can always jump. Well, you're only doing this because I'm gay, because you're homophobic, and then they can come back with some sort of accusation like that. So it goes on and on. And now it should be added that the bureaucrats don't believe that the minor political parties, if you're not globalist controlled, not a globalist controlled political party, as far as these bureaucrats are concerned, you're not only unsound, I guess, but also you're not legitimate. So your questions are not legitimate. You're not legitimate. The purpose of your inquiry and the purpose of your questions are not legitimate. So really, they're not incumbent. They're not required to answer them. Now, I'm old enough to remember when, if bureaucrats fronted political committees and they told lies or engaged in these levels of obfuscation, they would often be fired or would suffer demotion or some quite serious penalty. You know, it would go on their record that they were unreliable and they lied to a parliamentary committee. That doesn't happen anymore. You need a unanimous, excuse me, a unanimous verdict of the committee. And the major parties controlled by the globalists want this sort of obfuscate. They want it. They want the minor parties to be neutralised with their questions and to be neutralised. So the bureaucrats are just doing really what the globalists are demanding of them. So there's no penalty. They're rewarded, in fact, because they're following their instructions to debase and undermine and subvert a parliamentary committee. You'd think that would carry penalties, but the reverse is the case now. They're rewarded for it. And so even after hours of a parliamentary committee, 3 or 4 people, 5 people being there to answer, supposedly answer questions, they're able to divulge, barely a single fact. And even then, it's under a cloud of, we no longer use that method. We no longer have that criteria. We've changed. Well, what is that new criteria? Well, we haven't finalised yet. The committee for the undercommittee of the subcommittee of the steering committee that decides on these hasn't yet completed its undercommittee report to the subcommittee of the committee, and so on. And they can just go on and on this way. Now, why that should be tolerated even for 1 minute? Now, don't think that just in my own capacity in business, I've had to deal with not hugely bureaucratic, but people with a bureaucratic sort of intent to obfuscate things under layers of uncertainty and smoke-filled rooms and that's so-and-so's responsible for that. Oh, no, that's the undercommittee of the overcommittee and so on and so forth. And you have to really sort of steel yourself to go make a chase on it if you're going to get the facts and get the information you want. And these people, of course, don't want that information to come out. And so they'll do everything they can to avoid answering the questions and so on. And if that means they've got to accuse you of being a racist or a Hitler or something, they'll do that too. But they want to avoid it. But you have to, no, you are going to answer the question. But without the ability of these committees, given again the subversion or the level of subversion, to hold these public servants accountable for giving accurate answers, and it doesn't matter whether it's a senatorial committee in the United States or something in Britain, wherever the globalists are in control, you can find now that none of these parliamentary committees will answer questions honestly or directly, and will do everything they can to compromise the intent and purpose of the committee, which of course is to hold the public service accountable. Now, once again, coming back to this questioner in Britain, the one I'm thinking of at the moment, only the most determined questioner who's absolutely committed to keeping on going will be able to dig some facts out. And once they do, you find the most astonishing ineptitude, but also you find the deliberate, willful, purposeful, pre-planned, pre-choreographed attempt by the globalist controlled governments to hide and obscure the facts from the public. Now, even when this questioner dug out some key facts, none of the media touched it, even though I would have thought it would have been front page news. But in this case, what they were doing, and I'll paraphrase and simplify it here, what they're doing is for all the illegal aliens that say come into Britain, they use numerous and endless number of different classifications. So they'll use the A B C D E F G H I J K L M. They'll use all these different classifications, and each one is to be is a vehicle for obfuscation and for concealment of reality and the actuality and the facts. And this is purposefully done this way so that if, how many illegals came in, how many illegals do we have? We've only got 500 or something like that, when the number may be well over 100,000, well over 1 million or whatever it might be. But because they use these classifications, when you ask how many so-and-so, our classification for that is which means there's only 100 people. But hold on, over 1 million people came in. But they're classified differently, and so they use these sort of ridiculous games. But this is seriously widespread. But the extent of it is what sort of struck me just watching these committees or the minor parties, or interrogating or questioning the committee, and how absolutely determined these public service bureaucrats were to avoiding answering the question and to obscure all the facts. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.